sometimes I read a claim or a contention that somebody makes, and it's absolutely right, but it's using a logic that appeals to us. And what I was trying to say is use a logic that other people might understand to get them deeper into the world. Because here's the thing, they probably haven't sat down next to users and felt their pain. If you've ever done a usability test and you can see people wince or cry right next to you, you know how valuable that information is. They don't have that firsthand experience. So you have to use a logic that's going to appeal to them as well, too, to make the argument.
Welcome to the Human Insight Podcast, where we help you bridge the empathy gap to bring you a valuable, new understanding of some of the most innovative ideas and trends shaping the future of business and customer experience.
Hi, everyone. As we wrap up Season 4 of the Human Insights Podcast, we wanted to share a few bonus episodes with you. Over the next few weeks, we're rebroadcasting 3 LinkedIn Live conversations that Andy and Janelle had as part of their user-tested book tour. In this episode, Janelle talks with Jim Kalbach, Chief Evangelist at MURAL. Jim is an author of several books and provided some early feedback during the writing process for User Tested. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hi, Jim.
Hey, Janelle. Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for this LinkedIn Live session today to talk a bit about the user-tested book and Jim's sort of guidance and perspective that he provided throughout. Feel free to chat in your questions or comments. We can address them as they come in. And thank you all for joining. And a big thank you to Jim for coming on today onto the LinkedIn Live to chat through lots of different fun things with you all. And given it is Friday at 4:30 p.m. for Jim and I, we were going to do a little cheers or toast to the book being published. So exciting.
There we go. Congratulations. It's a really big effort as an author of books myself. It's a really big effort that you had the wherewithal to sit down and actually reverse engineer, decades of work in your brain and put it out there. So I think everybody should give you a big congratulations, and you should be proud.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Cheers. So for those of you who don't know Jim, he is the Chief Evangelist at MURAL. And he is, as he mentioned, the author of a handful of books. So he authored the Jobs to Be Done playbook, Mapping Experiences, and Designing Web Navigation. So naturally, when I was thinking about writing a book, I made sure that I put Jim on speed dial to help provide some perspective and feedback along the way. Just by way of storytelling, Jim and I met, I think it was 2 years ago now, perhaps.
Oh, yeah.
And we're both in similar roles within our companies, and Chief Evangelist, Chief Insights Officer. These are not roles you find everywhere. And so Jim and I connected around, how to do what we do and how we, represent our beliefs and evangelize, the work that we support through the technology that our companies provide. So it's been a fun couple of years chatting with him. And actually, I reached out to him and mentioned that I was thinking about writing a book. And he's like, oh, you totally should. And it took me a while to get around to it. But once I had the manuscript done, I actually sent the first 2 chapters over to Jim. And the first 2 chapters are all about kind of building the case for why what we believe human insight is and why that's important. And he also reviewed the last 2 chapters, which were focused on how to make this happen within your organization. So, how to get leadership to help you drive it forward, how to get teams involved. And he provided a ton of feedback just looking at those 4 chapters that really helped shape the book. So that's what we're going to talk about. Yeah. There's a few things that we'll walk through. And Jim will share his feedback, and then I will share how we decided to incorporate that. So Jim, the first piece of feedback you gave me after reading the first 2 chapters was around you wanted to see more stories. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's not just the stories. I think it was also evidence. I have a design UX background. UserTesting was a tool that I had used in various roles where I was on design teams. But coming here to MURAL, before I moved into the Chief Evangelist role, I actually headed up our customer success organization and support. And I was a little bit more on the go-to-market side of things, which took me away from the design community to some degree. And what I realized is that, and I think this happens in any discipline, so it's not necessarily a critique, it's just an observation of, and I became really sensitive to it, is us talking to ourselves. So UX people talking to UX people, or researchers talking to researchers.
Yes.
And when I read your book, I agreed with every word of it, with every fiber of my body, because that's what I believe. But I put on this external hat of people maybe who are either cynical or critical of it, or just don't know it. And I was thinking, how is this going to hit them? And I just wanted, I guess that comment was just around, hoping to kind of get out of an echo chamber a little bit, trying to push you out of the echo chamber and think about, getting a little more evidence. Not that you need to be to give up your values, but just to appeal to a broader audience, because I think the topic that you're writing about could and can and should appeal to a broader audience. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you put on that hat and that perspective, because it is so important. I've referred to, our sort of industry and peers as like, we all wholeheartedly believe in this practice. And so how do we not just have that shared view within our group, if you will, but kind of extend that outside of who we typically talk to.
Right. Yeah.
And I think you're right in that the sense of like, if you think about the practice of user testing, right? I talk to a handful of my customers and then I go do something based on what I learned. You always get the arguments of like, but you only talk to 5
It's only
people.
a couple. Right. Yeah.
Right. Or, I have a dashboard full of all the data that I could ever want about my customers. Why do I need to do this too?
Exactly.
And so pulling together the examples and stories, and we ended up packing the first 2 chapters with those kind of proof points and case studies based on that feedback.
Yeah. And you weren't only preaching to the choir there, me being the choir, but I think it's also the way that you need to show evidence and proof to a broader audience as well too. That I think, and this isn't a comment for you, this is actually just a general comment, design, UX, user research as well too, is that, sometimes I read a claim or a contention that somebody makes, and it's absolutely right, but it's using a logic that appeals to us. And what I was trying to say is use a logic that other people might understand to get them deeper into the world. Because here's the thing, they probably haven't sat down next to users and felt their pain. If you've ever done a usability test and you can see people wince or cry right next to you, you know how valuable that information is. They don't have that firsthand experience. So you have to use a logic that's going to appeal to them as well too, to make the argument. I think that's kind of what was in there too.
Yeah, exactly. So not just the practice of doing it, but why, from a business or metric perspective, this can actually help you move the needle,
Exactly. Right.
Speaking the language.
Right. And we've been trying to do that forever in the field, the ROI of design and usability justifications have been going on and on and on forever. So it's really just, keep striving to do that, to show the business relevance of it, because I think it's central. It's not a nice to have. I mean, that's like it. That's how you're going to know. That's how you get customer satisfaction and customer experience. And that's the core of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the other kind of comments you made, and maybe sort of in a similar vein, but, there are different organizations that have actually heavily leaned into metrics and experimentation to sort of drive the business and the results that they're looking to see. I mean, you hear stories of entire user research teams being let go and, doubling down on things like optimization teams. Right. As part of it, you mentioned, I loved how you played devil's advocate around how you actually can still be successful without actually talking to or observing customers. So
Right.
can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that, though, the fact that you have organizations like you described that are, just basically going into let's build something, measure it, and just iterate without doing any kind of synthesis or kind of upfront identification of unmet needs and things like that. And they might end up with a successful, how they define successful solution that actually gets out the door. So again, in having kind of stepped away from the field of design, I mean, I'm still involved and looking at it very closely, but I myself am not a practitioner anymore. And being a little bit more exposed to sales teams and business thinking and things like that as well too. Just thinking about the justification. Why do I need this user research thing again? Because I can actually get business results otherwise through build, measure, learn, or testing and that kind of thing. And I think that's, to some degree, that's true. There's more than one way to skin a cat, but I think you're also missing an opportunity to be able to find hidden opportunities, to come across hunches. I mean, what role does a hunch play in business these days? But a hunch can be everything. Yeah. Like every great company is started as a hunch, not as something that you can measure, because there are things out there, there's qualities and things out there that actually aren't measurable. And if you just cut that out, then you're an echo chamber then as well too. You're only kind of listening to yourself and getting your own feedback as well too. So it was actually devil's advocate, a comment, but also a message to folks that believe you don't necessarily need user research and things like that. You're probably missing part of the opportunity at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. I have a fun kind of story around this. So we were working with a customer. They were launching a new app for, it was a quick fast food restaurant, quick service restaurant. And they were looking at 8 different variations of the login button, like the call to action to log in or register, which, by the way, there are patterns for that everywhere that you could follow, right? But they wanted to make sure that the one that they put out live to their A/B test or multivariate test were the right ones, right? Because they had so many variations, they didn't know which one to put live. Yeah. So you can imagine yourself in that situation where you're just looking at it and you're kind of going by gut, right? Yeah. And what if you put out 2 that don't actually perform that well in comparison to the others?
Oh, interesting. Right. Yeah.
But what they did was they used user testing to sort of gauge feedback on these 8 different design variations. They came out with 3 clear winners, and that's what they used in their actual live A/B test and saw the results that they wanted to see. Now, of course, you could hypothesize or say, well, maybe that didn't matter. But in the sense of like my mindset around that is like, why even go out with something that's not optimal? Why not make sure it checks out before?
Agree. Yeah. And I've heard people say things like, when you start out, you have no idea the answer. So just start somewhere. Just start anywhere. And I'm not of that belief. I believe you can observe the world as it is. You can observe human beings in the world as it is, and systematically find insights that will maybe not guarantee success, but certainly constrain, a direction of what will actually meet that need. And then you can A/B tests have a great a function to optimize that optimizing point as well too. But I love the idea of saying, well, before we do an A/B test, let's check like 8 different things so we even know we're testing the right things, right? Which I just find that mindset problematic. I mean, I think what I'm also trying to say is it's not an either or. I think you really need both, because you can interpret metrics anyway, and if you don't have the sensibility that you very often get from qualitative research and observation to interpret the metrics, like metrics have to be interpreted regardless of what they are, even in A/B tests, right? And if you don't have that sensibility, then you're just going to be doing what a computer tells you, and you're not going to be thinking strategically.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to take another sip. Okay.
Okay, I will too, but maybe I'll do it after I ask my question.
All right.
So one of the things that you commented on, which I actually didn't incorporate into my edits. So the first two examples of the feedback Jim gave, I certainly implemented that into the feedback into the manuscript. But there was one piece where you were talking a little bit about this concept about validity versus reliability in market insights and how I should give a nod to that. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about what that feedback was?
There is a difference between validity and reliability. I'm certainly not an expert there. So if you're an expert in these things, I'll just characterize it at a super, super high level, where validity is the thing you're measuring is real. It actually mirrors the real world. You're measuring the right thing. Whereas reliability are measurements that are consistent and you can get, they're repeatable. So every time I measure it, I'm going to get the same thing. But having reliable metrics, every time I measure it, I get the same results. That doesn't mean it actually mirrors the real world. So it's kind of like the real world versus the measured world. And those can be two different things. I like to think about it like a target. And I've seen diagrams on the internet where it's like a target. And ultimately, what you want to do is you want to hit the bullseye and have a constrained kind of field of shot. Like you don't want to be scattershot. And sometimes qualitative research is scattershot on purpose. But reliability would be how often you can be consistently hitting the same point. And validity is, are you hitting the center of the target? Mm-hmm. In other words, I can have a reliable result and I can be hitting the same point all the time, but it's not the center of the target. Mm-hmm. It appears that it is, though, if you don't realize that, because you're like, I'm getting the same results all the time, but they're not results about the real world because you're off the target, right?
Sure.
And then sometimes when you do ethnographic research, actually, you're trying to cover the whole target. You're not even trying to hit the center, and that's fine as well, too. So you got to kind of realize validity versus reliability. You got to kind of realize like what's needed here. The danger that I see, though, is that reliable results don't necessarily match the real world. And it's just kind of a pet peeve that I have of over measuring or over relying on metrics to make decisions and not saying so you'll get a measurement back, particularly a quantitative measurement, right? And you'll say, okay, I have no choice. I have to do what that, what that said, without A, questioning whether does that reflect the real world, and B, can I use my own sensibility and intuition to actually interpret those results one way or another? Just looking at reliable results all the time can actually be dangerous and at worst, but missing opportunities as well too. So
sure.
That's what I just wanted to kind of bring that up. It's kind of a little pet peeve of mine right now. But I'm glad you ignored it because it opens up a can of worms.
Well, so I mean, I think it's the point is absolutely well taken and it is important. The reason why I chose to sort of ignore it, to use your word, was that, when I think about the sort of audience for the book, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, is that I want to make this practice approachable. I want to make it so what we do and are very skilled at doing can be accessed by other people. And in order to do that, you have to kind of speak their language.
Yeah, totally.
That language of validity versus reliability and market insights is not
it doesn't
common
work.
speak for business folks.
Right, agree.
But I will tell you that the concept of that was woven all throughout the book.
Yeah.
In particular, the use cases where you were the use cases and the different ways that you can go about capturing this feedback is all about capturing people in the real world.
Right. Totally.
Right?
Totally.
And just by a byproduct of doing that, you're addressing the point.
Yeah, agree.
There.
Agree. And I have to admit, after I read the first two chapters and I made the comment about having more evidence, and then I read later in the book and deeper into the book, the case studies that you chose they're amazing. They're great. They're really good. They bring the book to life. And there were way more later on than I had uncovered up front. And I actually felt like guilty. I was like, oh, I need to get more case studies in my writing. So that it's interesting you pulled out that comment too, because by the time I got done reading your book, I felt like ashamed of the amount of relevant case studies that I typically bring into my own writing. So it was actually inspirational the way that you ended up using stories and case studies and evidence throughout the book.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I know a big part of kind of bringing this to life is the storytelling aspect of it and how other companies do it. And, we have such fantastic customers and even just thought leaders in the space that have publicly available case studies that can be tied to some of these core themes that are brought forward in the book.
Yeah, no, it was really well done on that front. Just the real life examples just made a big difference for making the points that you wanted to make.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're going to wrap this LinkedIn Live up. Thanks so much, Jim, for joining us. Maybe
thanks for having me.
One more toast.
Yeah, cheers.
Before we go.
And again, congrats on the book. I do have a lot of book battle scars. I actually don't like writing. Don't tell anybody that. I don't know how I've gotten 3 books. It's not something I enjoy doing. But I do know that writing a book takes a lot of wherewithal and endurance and persistence. So cheers for you making it through to the end. And really excited to see it in print.
Yeah, me too. Waiting for it patiently.
When's it due? It's February 15th, I think.
February 15th. Yes. And I think we're going to be getting it a little bit early, maybe a week early. So exciting stuff.
Yes.
We're going to have more LinkedIn Lives around the book. The next one we have is with the COO of IDEO, Ian Roberts. So super excited for that one. And with that, thank you all for joining and have a great weekend. Thanks, Jim.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks, Janelle.
Want to keep the conversation going? You can visit our podcast hub, usertesting.com/podcast, and check out past episodes. If you haven't already, don't forget to follow us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Overcast, or Google Play, so you can never miss a good episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend or leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.